Hello, I'm Carl Rappold and welcome to Through the Lens. And today we are very honored and privileged, I may have, to have a guest with us that is very unique in many phases of his vocation. I'm talking about something that only a handful of people on our planet Earth has ever done, and that is to leave the confines of gravity to fly in space, not on one, but on 2 missions. In addition to many other exploits, such as being a retired colonel in the Air Force Academy, we have with us, and I'm going to let him expound on the rest of it before I steal all of his thunder, Mr. Guy Gardner. Guy, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
And also an honor.
Good to be here, Carl.
So without any further ado, tell us a little bit about your family and about where you're living at present time and your current vocation.
Yeah, well, I'm currently the president right down the road here at Williamson Free School of Mechanical Trades. And I know a lot of our folks here are familiar with that. We even have some alumni that living here in Marist Grove. Mm-hmm. And so we live on campus, and a 120-year-old house there was built when the school was built back in just about 120 years ago. And I have a wife, Linda. They've been married for over 40 years. We have 3 adult children and 3 grandchildren.
Very good, very good. Tell us, was there a specific time in your life, or maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, where space became the ideology that you wanted to pursue?
Well, you know, people ask me what got me motivated into pursuing the career of an astronaut, and I really don't remember, because I don't remember not wanting to be an astronaut or flying in space, even when I was a little kid.
That's interesting.
That was my dream.
Okay. Now, what kind of education did you pursue after high school?
Well, my dream of being an astronaut, all the early astronauts, as you'll recall, back with the original 7, and even after that, were all
Mercury 7.
Right, we're all test pilots, and decreed by President Eisenhower. And the first astronauts flew when I was in 8th grade, back in 1961.
Okay.
And so that set me on my course. I said, well, I want to be an astronaut, so I should be a test pilot. I should be a pilot. That sounded like Air Force to me. I didn't realize that we had Navy test pilots, Marine test pilots. And so Air Force Academy became my goal. And so that's where I went and got my undergraduate degree at the Air Force Academy.
And following the Air Force Academy, Vietnam?
Well, at first I went to Purdue and got my master's in engineering through a cooperative program with the Academy, and then checking pilot training, F4 upgrade, and then to Vietnam.
And I know you're being a little modest here, but I understand you flew 177 missions.
I did.
In Vietnam?
In Vietnam, South Vietnam, Laos, North Vietnam.
177 missions. Now, was it following Vietnam that you became a test pilot?
Well, first I had to get more flying time. There's a minimum requirement of 1,000 hours. So I went to actually North Carolina as an F4 pilot, operational pilot, and instructor pilot. And then off to test pilot school. Okay, good.
How extensive was test pilot school?
Well, it's a grueling 12-month program.
12 months.
Very, very busy, but just a blast in terms of flying experience. You get to fly a variety of different kinds of aircraft while you're there. They try to expose you to as many as they can, and so it's just a great experience.
Okay. Now, what are the prerequisites from NASA for entering the astronaut training program?
Well, to become an astronaut, first of all, they have 2 types, actually 3, but 2 main types, and only 2 when I was there: the pilot astronaut and the mission specialist. And obviously the pilot astronaut was the one I was applying for, and you, although not written, all the ones they pick have been through a test pilot school and have a set of experience. You need a bachelor's degrees. Most have master's degrees to be competitive in some kind of field of engineering or science or math. And then that's the pilot side. And nearly all have experience in the military, because that's the only place you can get that kind of high performance experience and still be fairly young to be competitive. Mission specialists are scientists, doctors, engineers, all who have done well in their field.
Now, without being modest now, and I want you to lay it on the line, how many apply and what percentage are chosen?
You know, Carl, I have no idea how many apply. Thousands apply.
Thousands.
And my group, we had 19 that were selected. About 9 or 10 of us were pilots.
How'd you find out about being selected? That had to be a joyful moment. I'm
well,
sure,
it was.
Where were you? Remember the day?
Well,
I'm sure.
I had an assignment. I was over in the Philippines, flying as a test pilot over there. We were doing a missile evaluation for our forces over in the Pacific Theater. And so with the time change, it was actually in the middle of the night when I got the phone call from NASA that I'd been accepted into the astronaut program. So needless to say, I didn't sleep anymore that night. I'm sure.
That was a party night.
Yeah,
that had to be a party night. Okay. So. Now, tell us a little bit about the training program with NASA. I realize it's extensive, I'm sure, as a layman, but from the individual that has experienced it, what is the training program like and how extensive?
Well, when you first get there, of course, you need to start out learning about any organization. So you learn about NASA because most of the people have never worked in NASA before. They come from universities, corporations, or of course the military. And so you learn about NASA. But then when it comes to learning your job of flying the shuttle or operating it, you start out with books. You've got all these manuals you learn. We have part task trainers, we call them, where you learn to practice the individual systems. Then you get together, you put all that together in a simulator that totally simulates the space shuttle, and you'll learn to put them all together, and then you'll start training as a crew in the functions of the space shuttle. And then, to top it off, then particularly once you're assigned to a mission and assigned to your crew, you'll actually, in the simulator, they can tie you into mission control. And so you will actually simulate doing a complete mission, including, the only thing is you can't float around in there. You
can't defy gravity there, right?
Right.
Okay. But what are the considerations by NASA for a mission? In other words, what I'm saying here, Guy, what determines a mission for you by NASA's criteria?
Yeah. Well, they'll assign, a lot of it's just seniority. Where are you in the queue is when you're up, particularly the pilot missions, because it's pretty much what the pilot and the commander do is pretty much the same from mission to mission. There are some differences, whether there's a rendezvous with it, docking with a space station, or for example, or whatnot. But pretty much you're all trained to do all of that. The mission specialist side, it may be that you come with a certain background, scientific background or medical background, and you'll be more likely assigned to that mission. For example, my second mission was an astronomy mission. We carried a set of telescopes up that we operated from the shuttle. We didn't put them out into space on their own. And so I had several of my mission specialists were astronomy backgrounds in their actually PhD education.
The mission, it's not the mission itself, but the preliminary to the mission, that training program there, what period of time usually is involved there? You
will typically be assigned to a flight about a year before its scheduled launch date. Now, what you're doing as an astronaut, actually a smaller percentage of your time is spent training for a mission. Most of the time is spent working with the thousands and thousands of people who work together as a team to make these missions possible. And you are the crew member representative to these smaller teams of individuals. For instance, I worked in mission control as the crew member representative with these other engineers who were not trained to fly the shuttle and never would in terms of interacting with the crew. Worked down in Florida getting the vehicles ready for flight with a crew member perspective on those kind of checkout tasks and the development of new procedures, development of new equipment, that kind of thing. And then about a year before flight you start training, still doing some of your other jobs, and then 6 months before flight you'll drop everything and just focus on training for that mission.
Are you told at that time that you will specifically be on that mission or as a backup crew, or how does that work?
Yeah, in the shuttle era program we didn't do backup crews. So about a year out from flight, you will be assigned to that mission, to that crew position, and you know that's what you're going to do. Now, of course, what happens is that year out may turn into a year and a day, or it might turn into 2 years or 3 years as we have had delays in the program.
That's very interesting. Now, you experience, of course, liftoff and how does that differ from all that training program? Can you say in a simulator that you can experience liftoff with the amount of G's and so forth, or do you experience that for the first time when you're on that launch pad?
Right. Now the space shuttle, our liftoff forces are, I will say, only 3 times the force of gravity, or what we call 3 G's. Right. The early astronaut missions with the Mercury and the up through Apollo, they pull 6, 7, 8 G's.
What is that like, Guy, experiencing that amount of G's?
Well, the 6, 7, 8 G's, you are really pushed back into your seat.
Can you actually move at that with that amount of G force against you?
You can. I mean, I've flown airplanes and pulled that many G's, and you can move, but you kind of set yourself where you want to be, so you don't have to. But flying a fighter, you're actually sitting up, and the blood's draining out of your brain, so you're fighting to keep the blood up in your brain so you can maintain consciousness. But if you're in a dogfight, you're looking around as well. And the shuttle, you're lying on your back, and we pull 3 G's, so you feel that pressure on your chest. I could still move my arms around. Some of our switches are even up over our head. I could still, I practice reaching those switches, and I can still do that. But keep in mind, you've got your arm and hand weigh 3 times what they normally do, plus you've got 3 times the weight of your pressure suit.
So
and
it's
gloves.
a lot of effort there for movement ability.
Right.
Okay. Now again, insofar as your experience with outer space, which very few people, as I mentioned prior to the show and during the show here, have ever experienced. What is it like to sit on that launch pad on that giant firecracker and hear 5, 3, 2, 2, 1?
Well, I'll talk a little more detail, and I've got some video when I come back here next week to share that with the residents here. But it's quite an experience.
I can well imagine. I can well imagine. So, in our lifetime, will we see interplanetary travel?
I hope so. The technology is there. I mean, we can get to Mars with our current technology. It's a 6-month minimum one-way trip. That's if the planets are lined up just right.
Right.
Could take longer if they're not. Some of the technology that we have to fully develop, though, the biggie is the radiation protection of the crew members, because they'll be out there exposed like they were on their way to the moon when we went back to the moon in the late 60s, early 70s, except instead of for a few days, it'll be for 6 months and longer while they're on the planet and coming back. So, but we have the technology. Now, the newer technologies that we're working on might shorten that trip a little bit. But it's there. It's just a function of, really the funding. It's be very expensive, and the national will to actually go do that.
So the capability is there. Right. Even excluding something to come down the road necessitating, for example, an exotic fuel to heighten that 6-month period of transition.
Yeah. Well, the exotic fuels are things that might shorten it. And what we're looking at is, like, there's a friend of mine is developing what we call a plasma rocket. Now, I'm not smart enough to understand it all.
Oh, you are, but you're not going to tell us.
But it's very low thrust, but you can thrust halfway there, so you get to a higher speed, which reduces the time. Then you turn around and start slowing down for the second half of your trip, and you could probably cut that time in half or so.
Okay.